Coast Guard finds abandoned yacht at dawn. Inside, every clock is stopped at 4:44 a.m. The emergency radio crackled to life at 5:47 a.m., cutting through the pre-dawn silence of the Coast Guard station like a knife through silk. Lieutenant Sarah Chin bolted upright from her chair, nearly spilling her coffee as the automated distress signal repeated its haunting message across the airways. Mayday, Mayday, coordinates 41.2847 north, 70.9987 west, crew missing, time running out. The transmission dissolved into static, then nothing. Dead air. Rodriguez, get the engines running, Chin barked to her crew. We've got a situation 12 miles northeast. The Coast Guard cutter Vigilant cut through the choppy Atlantic waters as the sun painted the horizon in shades of amber and gold. The morning mist clung to the waves like ghostly fingers, and somewhere in that ethereal landscape, a vessel waited. It appeared suddenly through the fog, a sleek, 85-foot yacht named Temporal Drift floating eerily still on the calm waters. No movement. No signs of life. The pristine white hull gleamed in the morning light, but something about the scene made Chen's skin crawl. Ahoy, Temporal Drift! Petty Officer Marcus Webb called through the megaphone. His voice echoed across the water and returned unanswered. Coast Guard! Anyone aboard? Silence. Chen studied the yacht through her binoculars. The deck was immaculate, chairs neatly arranged, fishing equipment properly stowed. It looked like a photo from a luxury boat magazine, too perfect, too undisturbed. Prepare to board, she ordered. Something's not right here. The boarding party consisted of Chen, Webb, and Seaman First Class Amy Torres. As they approached the yacht in their inflatable boat, Torres noticed something that made her stomach turn. Lieutenant, she whispered, pointing to the yacht's bridge. Look at the windows. Through the large windows of the pilot house, they could see the control panel. Multiple digital clocks and analog timepieces were visible, and every single one showed the same time, 4:44 a.m. Could be a power failure, Webb suggested, but his voice lacked conviction. They boarded the yacht with practiced efficiency, weapons drawn but hoping not to need them. The deck was spotless, almost obsessively clean. Personal items were arranged with military precision, a coffee mug sitting on a small table, still containing liquid that had long since gone cold. A book lay open to page 244, a bookmark made from what looked like seaweed marking the spot. Hello? Chin called out. Coast Guard! We're here to help. Her voice seemed to absorb into the yacht's interior, creating an unsettling echo that felt wrong somehow. The boat rocked gently with the waves, but the motion felt disconnected, as if the yacht was floating in a different ocean than the one they had traveled across. Torres checked the galley while Webb examined the deck equipment. Everything was in perfect working order, too perfect. The refrigerator hummed quietly, stocked with fresh food that should have spoiled days ago. The engine compartment was clean enough to eat off, not a drop of oil or grease anywhere. Lieutenant, you need to see this, Torres called from below deck. Chin descended into the main cabin, and her breath caught. The luxury interior was stunning, leather furniture, polished wood, brass fixtures that gleamed like mirrors. But it was the clocks that made her blood run cold. There were dozens of them. Wall clocks, desk clocks, grandfather clocks, even a collection of pocket watches displayed in a glass case. Every single timepiece showed 4:44 a.m. This isn't a coincidence, Chen muttered, examining a beautiful ship's chronometer mounted on the wall. She tapped the glass face. The hands didn't move. Webb's voice crackled through the radio. Lieutenant, I found something up here. The captain's quarters. Chen climbed back to the upper deck and entered the captain's cabin. The space was dominated by a large chart table, and spread across it was a map unlike anything she had ever seen. The paper looked old, not just aged, but ancient. The coastline was familiar, showing their current position off Cape Cod, but there was something else. An island. A small landmass marked with coordinates that placed it roughly 30 miles southeast of their current position. But Chin knew these waters like the back of her hand, and there was no island there. She had sailed these routes hundreds of times. Torres, get me the latest nautical charts, she commanded. Torres spread out the official Coast Guard charts beside the mysterious map. The island wasn't there. According to every modern navigation system, those coordinates marked nothing but open ocean. Look at this, Webb said, pointing to handwritten notes in the margins of the old map. The ink was faded but still legible. The time between times, when the veil thins, 4:44 the door opens. Chin picked up the yacht's logbook from the captain's desk. The leather-bound journal was filled with entries in neat handwriting. She flipped to the last page with writing. Day 17, the island calls again. I can feel it pulling at my mind, my soul. The crew thinks I'm losing my grip on reality, but they don't understand. Time moves differently there. The clocks, they know. They remember. We're running out of time. The window closes at dawn. If we don't reach the coordinates by 4:44 a.m., we'll have to wait another month. I won't wait. I can't wait. The island won't let me. The compass spins wildly now. North has no meaning where we're going. Mary thinks I should turn back, but she doesn't see what I see in the water. The lights beneath the surface. The shadows that move against the current. I've set course for the coordinates. God help us all. The entry was dated 3 days ago. The timestamp read 4:44 a.m. Chen's hands trembled as she closed the logbook. In the corner of the cabin, she spotted something else, an antique brass compass mounted in a wooden box. The needle spun lazily, but instead of pointing north, it pointed southeast, toward the coordinates on the map. Lieutenant, Torres called from the deck, her voice tight with concern. We have a problem. Chin rushed outside to find Torres staring at the yacht's GPS system. The screen showed their current location, but there was something wrong with the display. The coordinates were shifting, subtly but steadily, moving southeast. The anchor's secure, Webb reported, checking the windlass. But we're drifting. Chin looked at the water around them. There was no wind, no current strong enough to move a yacht this size. Yet the temporal drift was moving, drawn by some invisible force toward the coordinates marked on the mysterious map. Get on the radio, Chin ordered. Contact base. Tell them we're investigating a possible missing persons case and may need backup. As Torres worked the radio, Chin studied the ancient map again. The island was marked with symbols she didn't recognize, spirals, intersecting lines, and what looked like a clock face with all hands pointing to 4:44. The yacht continued its slow drift southeast, and Chen realized they faced an impossible choice. They could abandon the temporal drift and return to base, filing a report about an abandoned vessel with stopped clocks and mysterious maps. Or they could follow where the yacht was leading them, toward coordinates that shouldn't exist, to an island that appeared on no modern chart. Webb joined her at the chart table. Lieutenant, I've been thinking about that logbook entry. The captain mentioned his crew. Where are they? Chen had been wondering the same thing. The yacht was equipped for at least 6 people, maybe 8. Yet there were no signs of violence, no indication of struggle or panic. Personal belongings were still in the cabins, clothes in closets, toiletries in bathrooms, even a half-finished crossword puzzle on the galley table. They just vanished, Torres said, overhearing their conversation. Like they stepped out of time itself. As if summoned by her words, every clock on the yacht chimed in unison. The sound was impossible. Digital clocks don't chime, and the battery-powered wall clocks shouldn't have been able to maintain such perfect synchronization. Yet there it was, a haunting melody that seemed to come from the yacht itself. Chin checked her watch. 8:15 a.m. The yacht's clock still read 4:44. Pack everything, she decided. The map, the logbook, the compass. We're taking this evidence back to base. But as she spoke, she felt the yacht's pull growing stronger. The ancient compass needle spun faster, and somewhere in the distance, she could swear she heard the sound of waves breaking against a shore that shouldn't exist. The temporal drift had found them for a reason. And deep in her gut, Sarah Chin knew their journey was just beginning. 3 hours into their investigation, the Coast Guard team had turned the yacht inside out, but every answer only led to more questions. Chen found herself drawn back to the captain's quarters, where she discovered a hidden compartment behind a false panel in the desk. Inside lay a collection that made her breath catch, dozens of photographs, all showing the same mysterious island from different angles and seasons. Some images were faded black and white, others more recent color prints. The earliest photos bore dates from the 1940s, yet they showed the same captain who had written the recent logbook entries. "That's impossible," Torres whispered, peering over Chen's shoulder. "This guy would have to be over 100 years old." The photographs told a story of obsession. In the earliest images, the man looked young, perhaps in his 30s, standing on the yacht's deck with a crew of 5 others. But as the dates progressed through the decades, something disturbing became clear. While the backgrounds changed, the seasons shifted, and the yacht itself appeared to age and modernize, the captain remained exactly the same. Not older, not younger. Frozen in time. Webb discovered the crew's personal quarters, and what he found there sent chills down his spine. In the first mate's cabin, he uncovered a journal belonging to someone named Mary Castellano. Her entries painted a picture of growing unease. "Captain's been acting strange since our last trip to the island. He talks to himself, stares at those old photographs for hours. Says he's been making this journey for longer than any of us can remember." When I asked him what he meant, he just smiled and said, "Time is a circle, Mary. We've all been here before." Found him in the galley at 3 a.m., arranging and rearranging the clocks. All set to 4:44. When I asked why, he said it was the only time that mattered anymore. The time when the island breathes, whatever that means. I'm scared. We all are. But we can't leave him. He's been good to us, and this yacht, it's our livelihood. Besides, where would we go? Every time we try to dock at a normal port, something goes wrong. Engine troubles, navigation failures, whether that comes out of nowhere. It's like the yacht won't let us leave. Chen found an antique compass in the captain's personal effects, different from the one on the chart table. This one was smaller, more ornate, with inscriptions in a language she didn't recognize. Unlike the larger compass, this one pointed steadily north, but only when she held it. The moment she set it down, the needle began spinning wildly before settling southeast, toward the coordinates. "Lieutenant," Torres called from the galley, her voice tight with confusion. "You need to see this." Chen found Torres standing before the yacht's main electrical panel, staring at a discovery that defied explanation. Hidden behind the standard ship's electrical systems was another panel, one that looked ancient despite the modern yacht. Brass switches, copper wiring, and gauges that seemed to measure things that shouldn't exist. Temporal drift, dimensional stability, chronological anchor. "What kind of yacht is this?" Torres asked, tracing the strange wiring with her finger. Webb joined them, holding a leather-bound book he'd found in the engine room. "I think I know," he said, opening to a page marked with a dried flower. "This is a maintenance log, but not for normal ship systems. Listen to this. Temporal displacement engine requires recalibration every full moon. Chronometer array must be synchronized to 4:44 a.m. precisely, or risk temporal fracture. Warning, do not attempt to leave the vessel's influence during active displacement." Chen felt the yacht shudder beneath her feet, not from waves, but from something deeper. The ancient compass in her hand began to grow warm, and she noticed that the mysterious electrical panel was now humming with barely audible energy. "We need to get off this boat," she said, but even as the words left her mouth, she realized it might already be too late. Torres tried the radio again, but instead of their bass, she was picking up transmissions that made no sense. Voices speaking in accents from different eras, weather reports for storms that had ended decades ago, and most disturbing of all, their own voices from conversations they hadn't had yet. "Temporal drift, this is Coast Guard Station Chatham, do you copy?" came a voice that sounded exactly like Chen's own. "I didn't make that call," Chen said, staring at the radio in horror. The transmission continued. "We're approaching the coordinates now. The island is visible on the horizon. God help us, it's beautiful." Webb checked his watch and went pale. "Lieutenant, we've been on this yacht for 3 hours, but look at the sun." Chen looked up. The sun hadn't moved, It hung in exactly the same position as when they'd boarded, creating the same shadows, the same angle of light through the cabin windows. In the captain's quarters, she found one final piece of evidence, a letter addressed to the next crew. Her hands shook as she read. If you're reading this, then the yacht has chosen you, just as it chose us. We thought we were rescuing a distressed vessel, but the truth is far more complex. The temporal drift exists between moments, in the spaces where time bends. The island calls to it, and it calls to those who can help it reach its destination. We tried to resist, tried to return to our normal lives, but the yacht wouldn't let us. Every attempt to leave resulted in temporal loops, repeated days, conversations that happened in reverse. The only way forward is to follow the coordinates. The island has been waiting for us, for all of us, for longer than you can imagine. The previous crew is still here, in a way. We exist in the spaces between seconds, watching, waiting, hoping that the next team will succeed where we failed. The island promises answers, but the price is time itself. Follow the compass. Trust the coordinates. And whatever you do, don't let the clock start again until you reach the island. Time is the enemy now. Captain James Morrison, crew of the Temporal Drift, every voyage, every year, every time. As Chen finished reading, every clock on the yacht chimed again. But this time, the sound was different, desperate, urgent, as if the yacht itself was trying to communicate. The mysterious electrical panel flickered to life, and the temporal drift began to move with purpose, no longer drifting but sailing with supernatural determination toward coordinates that promised answers to questions they were only beginning to understand. Chen looked at her crew, saw the mixture of fear and curiosity in their eyes that she felt in her own heart. They were no longer just Coast Guard officers investigating a distress call. They were the latest crew of a vessel that existed outside normal time, bound for an island that shouldn't exist, following a path that had been walked by countless others before them. The yacht sailed on, carrying them toward their destiny, while somewhere in the spaces between seconds, the voices of previous crews whispered warnings and encouragement in equal measure. The moment Chen finished reading Captain Morrison's letter, the yacht's behavior changed dramatically. What had been a gentle drift became purposeful movement, as if the vessel itself had awakened from a long slumber. The ancient compass in Chen's hand spun wildly before locking onto a bearing that pulled at her very soul. "Lieutenant, the navigation systems are going haywire," Webb reported from the bridge, his voice tight with concern. "GPS is showing impossible coordinates, radar is picking up land masses that aren't on any chart, and the autopilot, it's engaged, but I didn't activate it." Chen rushed to the bridge, where the sight that greeted her defied all logic. The yacht's modern navigation equipment flickered between normal displays and something else entirely. Screens showing star charts from centuries past, ocean currents that moved in patterns that seemed almost alive, and a compass rose that spun with symbols instead of cardinal directions. "We need to take control," Torres said, reaching for the wheel. But the moment her hands touched the polished wood, she gasped and pulled back as if burned. It's warm. And I could swear I felt a pulse." The yacht's engines hummed with a resonance that seemed to come from the vessel's very bones. Chen checked the throttle controls, but they were set to idle. Yet the temporal drift moved through the water with increasing speed, cutting through waves that seemed to part before them with unnatural ease. "We should radio for backup," Webb suggested, but his voice lacked conviction. They all knew that normal Coast Guard protocols had no place in whatever reality they now inhabited. "With what?" Torres held up the radio microphone. "Every frequency is broadcasting the same thing, our own voices from conversations we haven't had yet, or maybe conversations we had in timelines that don't exist." Chen made a decision that would haunt her for the rest of her existence. "We follow the coordinates." "Lieutenant?" Webb's eyes widened. "Are you serious? Look around us." Chen gestured to the impossible instruments, the warm steering wheel, the way the sun remained frozen in the same position despite hours passing on their watches. "We're not in Kansas anymore. The yacht is taking us there whether we want to go or not. At least if we choose to follow, we maintain some illusion of control." Torres pointed to the horizon ahead. "Look." The ocean was changing. The familiar gray-green waters of the North Atlantic were giving way to something that seemed to shimmer with inner light. The waves moved in patterns that suggested intelligence, and in the distance, storm clouds gathered in formations that looked almost like symbols. The yacht's trying to show us something, Chen realized. She returned to the captain's quarters and spread out the ancient map. As she watched, new details appeared on the parchment, currents drawn in silver ink, depth markings that showed underwater mountains, and most disturbing of all, what appeared to be other vessels marked at various points along the route. "We're not the first," she whispered. "And we won't be the last." Webb found her there 20 minutes later, staring at the map with an expression of growing understanding and dread. "Lieutenant, I've been thinking about that maintenance log. The part about temporal displacement engine. What if this yacht isn't just sailing to the island? What if it's sailing through time itself?" Before Chin could respond, the yacht lurched suddenly, not from waves but from something deeper. The sensation was like falling while standing still, and for a moment, Chin could swear she saw other versions of herself standing in the same cabin, some in different uniforms, some in clothes from different eras entirely. "Did you see that?" Torres burst into the room, her face pale. "On deck, just for a second, there were people. Other crew members. They looked right at me, but they were translucent." The yacht's mysterious electrical panel began to glow brighter, and the brass switches moved of their own accord. Chen watched in fascination as the temporal drift gauge climbed steadily, while the dimensional stability reading fluctuated wildly. "We're not just traveling to the island," Chen said, the pieces finally clicking into place. "We're being pulled through layers of time itself. Every crew that's made this journey, they're all still here, in different temporal phases." As if summoned by her words, the yacht's intercom crackled to life. But instead of their voices, they heard others, dozens of them, overlapping in a chorus that spanned decades. "Follow the coordinates. The island chooses its own time. Don't fight the pull. Trust the compass. We're all here waiting." The voices faded, leaving only the sound of the yacht cutting through water that no longer behaved like any ocean they knew. Torres checked their position on the GPS, or tried to. The numbers were changing too rapidly to read, cycling through coordinates that covered impossible distances. "How long have we been traveling?" Webb asked, but none of them could answer. Their watches showed different times, the sun remained fixed in the same position, and their memories of the morning's boarding felt both recent and ancient. Chin made a final attempt to assert control. She reached for the radio, intending to send a mayday call, but the moment she touched the microphone, she heard her own voice broadcasting from the speaker. "Coast Guard Station Chatham, this is Lieutenant Chin aboard the Temporal Drift. We've reached the coordinates. The island is real. Repeat, the island is real." She hadn't made that transmission. Not yet. The yacht shuddered again, and this time when the sensation passed, they could see it on the horizon, a dark shape against the impossible sky, wreathed in mist that seemed to move with purpose. The island from the ancient map, the destination that had called to countless crews across time. "There's no going back now," Chin said, but her words were lost in the sound of the yacht's engines, which had begun to sing with harmonics that resonated in their bones. The temporal drift sailed on, carrying them toward an island that existed in the spaces between moments, where time itself bent to older rules and the impossible became inevitable. The island materialized from the mist like a memory half forgotten, its dark silhouette rising from waters that had turned an impossible shade of deep violet. As the temporal drift drew closer, Chin felt the air itself grow thick, as if they were sailing through liquid amber rather than atmosphere. "My God!" Torres whispered, gripping the deck railing. "It's beautiful. Beautiful, but wrong." The island's coastline shifted subtly as they watched, not from waves or erosion, but as if the land itself was breathing. Ancient trees dotted the landscape, their branches reaching skyward in patterns that seemed too perfect, too deliberate. And beneath it all, a low humming sound that they felt in their bones rather than heard with their ears. Webb checked his watch and frowned. "Lieutenant, we've been sailing for what feels like hours, but look at this." He held up his timepiece. The hands were moving backward, slowly but steadily. Time is running in reverse. Chen looked at her own watch and saw the same phenomenon. Yet she felt no younger, no sense of events undoing themselves. Instead, she felt as if they were moving through time like a ship through water, leaving ripples in their wake. The island's affecting local time, she realized. We're not just approaching a place, we're approaching a when. The yacht's engines began to slow as they neared the shore, and she noticed something that made her stomach lurch. The wake behind them wasn't spreading outward as it should. Instead, the disturbed water was flowing backward, erasing their passage as if they had never been there at all. Look at the beach. Torres pointed toward the shoreline. There's a dock. Indeed, a wooden pier extended into the water, its weathered planks looking as if they had been waiting for centuries. But more disturbing were the other vessels moored there, boats from different eras, different centuries. A Spanish galleon sat next to a modern motor yacht, while a Viking longship occupied the space beside what appeared to be a World War II patrol boat. Every crew that's made this journey, Webb said, his voice barely above a whisper. They're all still here. As the temporal drift approached the dock, Chen noticed that none of the other vessels showed signs of decay or age. They looked as pristine as the day they had arrived, preserved in the island's temporal bubble. The yacht moored itself, the ropes securing to the dock posts without any human intervention. The moment they touched the pier, Chen felt the weight of centuries pressing down on her. The air was thick with the scent of ocean brine and something else, something that smelled like time itself, if time had a scent. The atmosphere here is different, Torres observed, taking tentative steps onto the dock. It's like walking through honey. Chen followed, and immediately understood what Torres meant. Each movement required effort, as if the island's gravity was stronger, or perhaps time itself was denser here. Her footsteps echoed strangely, the sound seeming to come from multiple directions at once. Stay close, she ordered, though the words came out slower than she intended. Something about this place affects speech, movement, everything. Webb was the last to leave the yacht, and as his feet touched the dock, he turned back to watch the temporal drift. Lieutenant, the yacht, it's changing. They all turned to see the vessel shifting, its modern lines becoming more classical, then more ancient, cycling through different configurations as if it were showing them every version of itself that had ever existed. It's not just one yacht, Chen realized. It's every yacht that's ever made this journey, all existing in the same space. The path from the dock led upward through terrain that defied easy description. The ground beneath their feet was solid, but it seemed to ripple like water when they weren't looking directly at it. Plants grew in impossible spirals, their leaves catching light that came from no visible source. The trees, Torres pointed to a grove ahead. They're moving. Not swaying in the wind, there was no wind, but actually moving, their trunks slowly rotating, their branches reaching toward the Coast Guard team with what seemed like curiosity rather than menace. As they climbed higher, the island revealed more of its secrets. Stone structures emerged from the landscape, not ruins but buildings that seemed to exist in multiple time periods simultaneously. A medieval castle occupied the same space as a modern observatory, while ancient standing stones stood beside what appeared to be pieces of futuristic technology. None of this should be possible, Webb said, but his voice carried wonder rather than fear. Possible is a relative term here, Chen replied, studying a structure that seemed to be built from crystallized time itself. We're not in our world anymore. We're in a place where all moments exist at once. The humming sound grew stronger as they approached the island's center, and Chen began to distinguish individual tones within the harmony. They were voices, she realized, thousands of them, speaking in languages from every era of human history. The island is alive, Torres said, kneeling to touch the ground. I can feel it breathing. As if responding to her words, the ground beneath them pulsed gently, and the air shimmered with colors that had no names. In the distance, they could see the island's heart, a structure that seemed to be built from pure light, surrounded by figures that moved with the fluid grace of people who had learned to exist outside normal time. We're not visitors here, Chen understood suddenly. We're pilgrims. And this island, it's been waiting for us specifically. The path ahead led toward answers they weren't sure they were ready to face, But like every crew before them, they found themselves unable to resist the island's ancient call. As they ventured deeper into the island's heart, the Coast Guard team discovered remnants of civilizations that should never have coexisted. Towering obsidian pillars covered in hieroglyphics stood beside Celtic stone circles, while Mayan pyramids shared space with structures that seemed to be built from pure mathematics made solid. "These aren't ruins," Chin observed, running her hand along a wall that pulsed with inner light. "They're still alive, still functioning." Torres knelt beside a series of carved symbols that seemed to shift and change as she watched them. "The markings, they're not just decorative. They're telling a story." She traced one with her finger, and suddenly understood its meaning without knowing how. "This symbol means between time. This one is the Watchers. And this..." She paused, her face paling. "This means the price of passage." Webb had wandered toward what appeared to be an abandoned encampment. Modern equipment lay scattered among ancient artifacts, laptops beside Bronze Age tools, satellite phones next to stone tablets covered in cuneiform. But it wasn't abandoned, he realized. It was preserved, waiting. "Lieutenant, over here," he called, his voice echoing strangely in the temporal distortion. "I found something." Chin joined him at what looked like an archaeological dig site, but one that had been excavated through time itself rather than Earth. Layers of different eras were visible in the exposed ground, Roman coins mixed with future currencies, Viking weapons alongside laser-cut tools, all existing in the same soil. At the bottom of the excavation, Webb had uncovered a piece of familiar leather, the corner of a journal. Together, they carefully extracted it from the temporal sediment. It was Captain Morrison's logbook, but not the one they had found on the yacht. This one was older, weathered by decades of island exposure. Chin opened it with trembling hands. The entries inside spanned impossible time frames. "Your unknown day unknown, we've been here for what feels like centuries, but also no time at all. The island doesn't follow our rules. I've watched the sun rise and set thousands of times, but I haven't aged a day. The others, they're changing, becoming part of the island's consciousness. The truth is more terrible than we imagined. This island isn't just hidden from history, it's been erased from history. Every civilization that found it, every explorer who made the journey, they all made the same choice we're facing now. The island feeds on temporal energy, on the moment when someone decides to stay or leave. That decision creates a fracture in time itself, and the island grows stronger. We're not prisoners here. We're fuel." Torres found more evidence as she explored a structure that seemed to be built from crystallized moments. Inside, she discovered displays that showed the island's history, or perhaps its future, or all possibilities at once. The images revealed the truth that Captain Morrison had discovered. The island exists in the spaces between decisions. She called to the others, her voice filled with awe and horror. "Every time someone faces the choice to stay or go, it creates a temporal fracture. The island positions itself at those moments." Chin studied the displays, watching as they showed countless crews throughout history making the same journey. Vikings, Phoenicians, Spanish conquistadors, modern researchers, all drawn by the same mysterious pull, all facing the same impossible choice. "But why us?" Webb asked. "Why now?" The answer came from an unexpected source. A figure emerged from behind one of the crystalline structures, a woman in a Coast Guard uniform identical to theirs, but with insignia from decades past. She moved with the fluid grace of someone who had learned to exist outside normal time. "Because the island is dying," she said, her voice carrying the weight of centuries. "I'm Commander Sarah Matthews, Coast Guard, class of 1987. I've been waiting for you." Chin stared at the woman who shared her first name, understanding dawning. "You're from one of the previous crews. The pattern is breaking down," Matthews continued. "Too many crews have chosen to stay. The island needs fresh temporal energy, needs someone to make the choice to leave. But here's the terrible truth, the choice itself is an illusion." She led them to the island's center, where a structure of pure light pulsed with the heartbeat of time itself. Around it, figures from every era of human history moved in endless patterns, their forms translucent, existing in multiple moments simultaneously. Everyone who comes here becomes part of the island's temporal matrix, Matthews explained. We're all still here, in every moment we've ever existed. The island doesn't just preserve us, it fragments us across time. Chin found a final piece of evidence buried beneath the light structure, fragments of her own journal, written in her own handwriting, describing events that hadn't happened yet, or had already happened, or were happening in parallel timelines. We chose to stay. We chose to leave. We chose to fight. We chose to surrender. Every choice exists here simultaneously, and the island feeds on all of them. The next crew will arrive soon. They always do. The yacht calls to them just as it called to us. They'll think they're rescuing a distressed vessel, but they're really responding to their own future distress call, echoing backward through time. The island's secret isn't just that it exists outside history. It's that it creates history, shapes it, uses our decisions to weave new timelines into existence. We're not explorers here. We're threads in a tapestry that spans all of time. As Chin read her own impossible words, she felt the weight of understanding settle on her shoulders. The island hadn't chosen them randomly. It had been guiding their entire lives toward this moment, this choice that would echo backward and forward through time itself. Now you know, Matthews said, her form beginning to fade as the island's temporal currents shifted. The question is, what will you choose to do with that knowledge? Around them, the island pulsed with anticipation, waiting for a decision that had already been made, was being made, and would always be made, in the endless dance of time that kept the ancient mystery alive. The truth hit Chin like a physical blow. Standing in the heart of the island, surrounded by the temporal echoes of countless crews who had made this same journey, she finally understood the full scope of the trap they had walked into. The island doesn't just reveal itself to those it chooses, she said, her voice carrying across the impossible landscape. It creates the circumstances that lead people to choose it. Commander Matthews nodded, her form flickering between solid and translucent. Every distress signal, every abandoned yacht, every mysterious disappearance, they're all invitations sent backward through time. The island needs new temporal energy to sustain itself, so it creates the very mysteries that draw investigators. Torres stared at the crystalline structures surrounding them, each one pulsing with the preserved moments of decisions, made and unmade. The yacht crew. Captain Morrison and his team, they weren't the first to disappear. They were bait. And we're the latest fish to bite, Webb added grimly. But Chin was studying the patterns in the temporal display, watching the ebb and flow of time streams that surrounded the island. Something was different about their situation. Where previous crews had been drawn in by desperation or obsession, they had come with different motivations. No, she said slowly. We're different. We came here to help, not to seek something for ourselves. That changes the equation. Matthews looked surprised. What do you mean? Chin pointed to the timeline displays showing their journey. Unlike the other crews, whose paths showed single, converging lines toward the island, theirs showed multiple divergent possibilities. Futures where they stayed, futures where they left, and futures where they did something else entirely. The island feeds on selfish choices, Chen realized. Greed, obsession, the desire to possess its secrets. But we came here for duty, to save lives. That gives us options the others didn't have. She turned to her crew, seeing the understanding dawn in their eyes. We can choose to leave, but that's not enough. The island will just create another mystery, call another crew. The cycle will continue. So what do you suggest? Torres asked. Chen looked at the temporal matrix surrounding them, at the countless souls trapped in the island's time streams, and made a decision that echoed through past and future simultaneously. We break the cycle. She approached the central structure of light, where the island's consciousness resided. As her hands touched the crystalline surface, she felt the weight of centuries pressing against her mind. The island's voice spoke without words, offering her the same bargain it had offered every crew before them. Stay, and become part of something eternal. Learn the secrets of time itself. Watch civilizations rise and fall. Become more than human. Or leave, and forget. Return to your small lives, your linear time, your mortality. But know that others will come, and the cycle will continue. There's a third option, Chen said aloud, her words carrying through the temporal distortion to reach every soul trapped in the island's matrix. We remember. She pulled out the modern emergency beacon from her Coast Guard equipment, technology the island hadn't accounted for. With Torres and Webb's help, she began to reprogram it, not to send a distress signal, but to broadcast the island's coordinates and its true nature to every vessel in the Atlantic. If we can't destroy the island, we can expose it, she explained as she worked. Make it known, mapped, studied. Turn it from a mystery into a documented phenomenon. The island's consciousness reacted with something that felt like rage mixed with panic. The temporal storms around them intensified, trying to prevent them from completing their work. Commander Matthews watched in amazement. No one has ever thought to simply tell the world. Because everyone who found it was looking for something secret, something hidden, Chen replied. They wanted to keep the mystery to themselves. But we're Coast Guard. Our job is to make the seas safer for everyone. As the beacon transmitted its modified signal, something fundamental shifted in the island's nature. The trapped souls began to fade, not into nothingness but into peace. Released from their temporal prison by the simple act of making their suffering known. The island was never truly malevolent, Matthews said as her form began to dissolve. It was lonely. It fed on secrets because secrets were all it knew. But acknowledgement, that's different. That's freedom. The island began to change around them. The impossible structures remained, but their temporal distortion faded. Time began to flow normally. The ancient consciousness that had sustained itself on mystery and hidden knowledge found itself transformed by the novel experience of being understood rather than feared. Chen and her crew walked back to the dock, where the temporal drift waited, no longer a vessel trapped between moments, but simply a yacht that had served its purpose. Other vessels remained moored there, but they were now museum pieces rather than prisons, preserved for the researchers and scholars who would come to study this place openly. As they sailed back toward the mainland, Chen watched the island recede into the distance. It was still there, still visible, but no longer hidden. Within hours, their beacon signal would reach every Coast Guard station, every maritime authority, every oceanographer in the world. What do you think will happen to it now? Torres asked. Chen smiled, watching the sun finally begin to move across the sky as normal time reasserted itself. It becomes what it was always meant to be, not a trap, but a wonder. Not a secret, but a discovery. Behind them, the island settled into its new existence, no longer needing to steal time from others. And for the first time in millennia, all its clocks began to tick in harmony with the world beyond, marking moments that belonged to everyone, not just the few who dared to seek the impossible. The mystery was solved not by keeping its secrets, but by giving them away.